Hi everyone, I'm Chris P. Thanks for everybody who's joining us live and everybody who'll watch this later. Today I'm joined by Paul Furlong and Randall Porter as part of our panel. Matt Middlestat may make a cameo guest appearance. But Paul, I'm going to pass over to you so you can introduce yourself, tell us what Rush Club you're with, and then we'll move over to Randall.
Thanks, Chris. Paul Furlong, Executive Director with Tennessee Lobos Rush. We're based out of Memphis and North Mississippi. And I've been with the club a little over 20 years now.
20 years. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Paul. And Paul, we'll discuss a little bit about the 4 teams you have on at Nationals. 2 advanced into the semifinals and 2 made it to Nationals. So congratulations and great leadership there.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Randall, over to you.
Yes, Randall Porter with Kansas Rush Soccer Club. We're based out of Olathe, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City. Been with the club for 11 years now.
Brilliant. And what's your role, Randall, at Kansas Rush?
I'm the Senior Director of Coaching. So
Senior Director.
13 and above, and then the Competitive Director, so help oversee all the competitive teams.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about your tryouts and the tryout process, and then we're going to look at lessons learned and are we thriving or are we surviving? And if we're surviving, how do we get to thriving? And so on and so forth. So, Paul, I'm a member of your 360 newsletter, and I noticed in that newsletter that you have multiple locations, right? You want to talk a little bit about how tryouts looks and some of the complexities of that?
Yeah, basically the way we're structured is we've got 5 locations in total in and around the Memphis metro area, with 4 of the locations are really satellite locations that are for our younger age groups. That officially they should be U8 through U12. We then have a central location where at U13 all the players come together, and that's where they train, that's where they play, and so on. So what we do that in order to try and keep things local for the players at those younger age groups, so they're not spending 45 minutes to an hour in the car going to practice 2 or 3 times a week, and it works out pretty well. However, when it comes to the tryout process, there can be there's a lot of complexities to it. One, the first thing is the marketing of it. We get a lot of questions each year, and regardless of what we put together about, hey, I want to try out here, can I try out somewhere else, can I, just all those questions. I'm a U13 but I want to try out this location, but you don't have. So that's one of the big hurdles that we have to get over each year, is just educating the not necessarily the membership but the potential membership. Then what you have is, for several years it worked very well with the satellite locations, and they were all relatively independent and everyone wanted to stay in their own location. But what, success sort of breeds success. So now what we end up having a little bit more of each year is, a U11 team might be particularly good at one location. So what you then, our membership then sort of dictates what happens, and then they start saying, someone who might be in X location now wants to go to Y location, but they also want to try out at X location. And, we've tried a few different things of, having the tryouts at the same times on the same nights to kind of nix that, but it doesn't work. So we allow them to go to multiple locations, which is fine, and it's the member's choice, and that's the way it should be. But then when you get on the flip side of forming teams, you could potentially have 2 or 3 coaches within the organization offering spots to the same player. And, sometimes during that time, the communication is not always the best. And then we sort of have some issues with, confirming some of our rosters.
Got you. So just to summarize, 5 locations, yeah? And then most of them are, for the 8 to 12s, are in the areas.
Yep.
And then at 13, you come together more for central location.
It's in a central location, yeah.
So, but what you were saying, Paul, is that if I'm at one of your branches, I can try out at all the other branches if I want to.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the coaches, there might be 3 coaches that like the same kid, so he might get 3. The child might get 3 offers.
Yep.
And it's funny you mentioned communication, because when I met with the parents of different rush clubs, they also said communication was something that could be better, right?
Absolutely.
We'll come back to a couple of those things, Paul. Randall, you want to talk a little bit about, and this is, you said you had different locations, but coaches making the same offers, right, to the same child, for example. Paul.
Yes.
Randall, you want to jump in there and talk a little bit about your process and how that goes, and how the state dictates kind of what the tryout looks like?
Yeah, sure. We don't have the same issue that Paul has. We just have one location. We basically have a day or two to try to form all of our teams. The state gives you a date of when you can hold tryouts, start tryouts. You can't offer spots to players from other clubs until that specific date. And so every club in the cities, in the whole state, basically holds tryouts that one day, and you try to form as many teams as you can on day one. Because if players don't get offers on day one, they will go somewhere else on day two to try to get an offer there. So it makes it difficult just because you some age groups you'll have 50 or 60, 70 kids. You obviously have an idea of where everybody is at within your own club by doing age group trainings and things like that we do. But you have outside players come in trying to figure out where they need to go. And like we all say we can always communicate better, but it's also a very hectic day or two for us. And so you've got to be careful what you communicate, because whatever you communicate, you have to make sure you're able to follow up. And so it's just it's kind of a I don't know what the right word is. It's just an exhausting couple days trying to form your teams. And I feel like there's got to be a better process. But I also know that in our market, if we don't do it on day one and get everybody in and try to get the teams formed, then we will lose players because there's so many options in such a small area.
Yeah, so there's the business aspect of it, Randall, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And Paul, so, what I heard you say, Randall, there is obviously communication can be better, but it is an exhausting process actually physically and building the teams. Because I was lucky enough, or should I say unlucky. Unlucky enough to be part of the Kansas Rush tryouts, which I came in Monday. We had a coaches meeting. Randall and Dowda laid out everything, what the expectations were, how they want the teams built, how the process was going to go, the schedule. You shared a list of the players, the potential players that were coming in, essentially, and the times. And then I think the first tryout started at 9, the next one at 10:30. Am I off a little, Randall?
Every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours, so 9, 11, 1, 3, 5, and 7.
5 and 7, yes.
Yeah, and there was multiple tryouts going on. And I remember through that meeting, Randall, you said, 90% of the teams need to be built after day one. And then in the next sentence, Dada said 92% of the teams, and then we ended up at 95% of the team being built in day one. So, Randall, I think what I felt and what I saw was I felt like a bunch of coaches must have felt like stockbrokers on Wall Street, right, on that day after the first day. And it was like, are you in? Hello, I'm making your call. So it was pretty hectic, right? Watching the coaches between and the coaches who had some downtime and stuff like that. So it was really exciting to be a part of. And we all talk about how we can change the process a little bit to better suit everyone and stuff like that. But Paul, what things have you guys done or changed over the years where you've found, well, this has been really successful? Do you know what I mean? What kind of thing. So you talked about the different marketing, and how do you go about getting the kids in? Because you have a pretty big rec program as well, don't you, Paul, underneath you?
Yeah.
How do you kind of pave the pathway at Tennessee, where you're going from rec, I'm going to say, to regional championships, to national championships, and basically mapping that out and how you communicate with your people?
Yeah, it's trying to, within our recreational we got one large rec program, and then we've got several sort of satellite programs that we're involved in. So it's again, it's trying to communicate and almost visualize for those families that are in those recreational programs what the next step can be. So whether that's our director of recreation, who's working with the U5s, the U6s, the U7s.
Is that Wes?
Yeah, he's no longer with us though. He's moved.
Okay.
Working with those age groups and then setting up specific sessions throughout the course of the year, not just a week or two before tryouts, but throughout the year, so they know, hey, there is a competitive program, and making sure that they're introduced to coaches along the way, to our competitive directors, and just because otherwise they get to a point, and if they don't know, then they're going to Google it, and we might not be top of the Google search. And they could end up, or they know someone at work and they end up going in a different direction. So it's really doing what we can as an organization during those younger years, when people are not even thinking about competitive, but at least giving them an idea that, hey, this is within the program.
So planting the seed early.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that. And then, so how many sessions would you say, Paul, that your rec director does throughout the years for those 5, 6, 7s? Is it just sessions, or is there parent engagement and parent education?
Yeah, I mean, he's doing sessions for the rec players and the coaches. I mean, every week. So they know our recreational program used to be called something different. It's now called, it's now part of Lobos Rush. So that helps that there is some continuity, and you can't just leave it till the week or 2 weeks before tryouts to start doing things. It's got to be an ongoing thing where they just, it's just a seamless path.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. So you're drip feeding them all the way through,
All the way.
getting them in. Brilliant, brilliant. Randall, do you want to jump on that? And what are you guys doing at Kansas, and how are you getting the players in? Because I remember 7 years ago I came to visit, and I was blown away by that player camp that was going on.
Yeah, so we similar to Paul in that we have a fairly good, decent sized recreational program. I think we kind of identified a number of years ago that we weren't doing a great job of transitioning those players and letting those players and families know about the competitive program. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've put a much bigger emphasis on that. Put some of our better coaches, I should say, down at some of those younger ages to develop some of those teams. Started a different program called Intermediate Academy, program called Pre-Academy, where for all those U6, U7, U8 players that we've identified through watching rec games, or people that recommend players, starting extra programming for them. So typically when we get to that U8, U9 competitive age group, we have a fairly large group of players already that know all about it. And so it's been good the last couple of years. Our club's kind of transitioned to where in the past, most of our numbers were in the older age groups. And now a lot of our larger numbers are in the younger age groups, which for a club like ourselves, that's important to build at the base, and that helps us as we get older. So it's can always be better. We don't necessarily have a recreational director that runs sessions for the coaches and players. We do multiple free clinics for our recreational players based on their birth year that are competitive staff runs. And then we have a meeting with myself or Data has a meeting with all the parents to explain the next steps of if they're interested. So that's how we do it. And like I said, I think it's been much more successful recently how we've changed it a little bit.
Yeah. I was there in March that one year, about 7 or 8 years ago, Randall, and that was a free clinic, but you had a bunch of the competitive players working with the kids as well, right?
Yes.
So it was more like a mentor program and just getting the kids in there working active. And I think that was, it was brilliant to see. And that still goes on, you say, several times a year?
Correct. Yes. Yes, we do. We try to do at least one in the fall, and then 2 in the spring as we get closer to the tryout time.
Yeah, brilliant. Paul, I'm just going to flip back to you, and Keith and Chico from, I think Chico's in Argentina. I always get it wrong, Chico. I apologize if I do. Uruguay. He's in Uruguay. If you guys have questions, please feel free to unmute, put your cameras on, join us, and ask questions as well. Colombia, sorry, Chico, sorry. He just put it in the chat and corrected me. But Paul, through this tryout process, would you say that you've grown? Have you grown in numbers, and you've grown in teams? And what would you attribute that growth to, if you have grown?
There has been a small amount of growth this year, and it's really been to some of the programming we've been doing in North Mississippi was an area is got huge untapped potential, and you probably come across BT James through Rush Select. He's our director, he's our DOC down there, and he's done a great job.
BT's?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness, sorry to hear that. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Look, every time he calls me, I have the same thing.
Yeah.
But he's done a fantastic job sort of overseeing our North Mississippi program, and we've had, we've probably tripled in size down there in 2.5 years. So that's been a big driver of our growth. A few years ago, similar to what Randall just mentioned there, we always just kind of looked at the bottom line number of, hey, total number of players. But we've been pretty consistent over the years prior. But anyway, we decided to dig down into our numbers a little bit, and we found a worrying trend that over those 3 prior years, our younger age numbers were going down, but our older age numbers were going up because we were having success at those older age groups. The bottom line player count number was actually being held up by older players coming to us in high school, which, from a business standpoint is not particularly sustaining. So we made a few changes a few years ago to put a lot more emphasis on the recreational program and on the U7s, on the U8s, on the U9s, on the U10s, to ensure that, yes, they're getting the best coaching, they're in the best environments. And now we've seen, the switch flip, where it is, this younger age groups that keep the numbers, increasing year over year, even if it's just a small amount.
That's brilliant. So just really focusing on the foundation, right? Because that's what we got to build first. We can't put the roof on the house first. We got to put the foundation. And would you say that the numbers have grown at the younger ages because of the coaching switch and stuff like that? Or would you say it's cost related? Is it success related? Is it a little bit of everything?
Well, I think it's just, it all comes down to the coaching. I think everyone can probably agree on this call that the individual experience, we can, as administrators and directors, we can come up with all the fancy programs in the world, and all the nice uniforms and all the marketing and everything like that. It's the experience that the individual player and family have with their team coach. If that is negative, then everything else means nothing. So absolutely, as always, concentrating on the coaches, but then focusing more on those younger age groups to ensure that, yes, if we're not in a big market, so we don't have a huge coaching pool. So it's if we're assigning a lesser experienced or a younger, coach to a particular team, it's making sure that there's some oversight over that coach as well, rather than just saying, hey, there you go, take this team, and then in a year's time or 6 months' time, the team's gone. It's making sure that our directors are overseeing those coaches.
Yeah, super. So, Paul, what would you say are, a couple of the non-negotiables when you're talking to your coaches to have them?
I mean, I think that what we've got to see, what players have to see, and what the families have to see is that the coach is committed to them. It doesn't matter whether it's a fourth team, U9 or a Division 1, U17, team that's competing at nationals. We have to see a commitment, a level of commitment that goes above and beyond just, hey, within your coaching contract, you're going to do X amount of sessions, you're going to wear this kit, you're going to go to X tournaments. Everyone knows those are the minimum standards. It's working with our coaches to make sure that they're committed to everything that they do within the club. And I think that if we as a staff have that with our coaches, then I don't want to say everything else takes care of itself, because it does not. But if your foundation is that, look, we're all committed to this player or to this team or to this age group, then we can probably work through any of the issues that come up. It's when someone's not committed, then the issues really arise.
Yeah, brilliant. Huge there. Randall, can you build off that? Some cherries on?
Yeah, I don't know what you want me to build off of. I think I agree with Paul that it all comes down to coaching and making sure that your third and fourth team and those younger kids are getting the same experience as the teams that win state cup and go to regionals and play in the different girls academy leagues, different national leagues that we're a part of, making sure that they get the same attention that those teams get as well. And then for us, a big thing with our younger kids is just the energy that the coaches have, making sure that they're engaged and participating with them, and not just standing on the sideline with their arms crossed and watching, especially in training sessions, getting out there and having that energy, and because the kids will feed off of that at the younger ages. So it's not much different than what Paul said. For us, it was just it was one, coaching, but two was just as a club putting more of an emphasis on those younger teams, because we were having a lot of success in the older age groups, doing well, and luckily we still are. But when we changed our emphasis to younger teams, transitioning those kids from rec to competitive, that's when we saw some growth on a business side and numbers wise.
Brilliant. So in talking with players, and I brought this up before we started recording, some of the players thought they said that they wish that tryouts was for 4 nights, because they didn't, if you were outside the club, can a coach get a real good snippet of a player in an hour and a half, right? I just think of the complexities that would bring doing 4 days of tryouts instead of 2. Randall, I'll go with you for your thoughts first. Imagine doing 4 days of that instead of 2. What do you think? That's a different way, right?
Yeah, I mean, to get an actual, I think every age is a little bit different, especially maybe the 08 or the U8s through the U12s, U13s. Multiple days would be better, because those younger kids, some of them might be the first time they've ever gone through a trial process. They may be nervous and timid. They might not know anybody. Do a lot of standing around, and then by the 3rd or 4th night, they know people, and they're get a truer valuation of where they're at. The older ages, I don't know how it is in every market, but typically in the age groups that I personally coach, I don't even most of the time really even need to see a tryout. I just need to see who's there, because I'll know most of those players within the city. So younger ones, yes, I could see that, but and I think the problem with that is that everybody else is doing the same thing, and if you don't offer spots, after the first day, they get nervous and think they might not make a team, and they can go 5 minutes down the road to another club, and that club will offer them a spot, and you lose them. So I agree. The more evaluation time at the younger ages, and maybe something we could do a better job of at those younger ages is we do a lot of playing. And that's 95% of a tryout is just divide up and play. Maybe at those younger ages we could do a little more technical work to evaluate players. But then it goes back to what you saw and what you experienced when you were here is by 3 o'clock on after you've been there since 7:30, how much technical session do you really want to try to run? Do you want to just get them divided up and let them play and watch? So yeah, there's definitely some things that we can improve, but 4 days to me is for a player, sure, but for a staff and for the market we have here and the way we have to do things, I would rather go to 1 day than to add a third or a fourth day.
Yeah. Paul, what do you think? 4 days? Any traction?
We do 3 days right now. And apart from our youngest age groups, the U8s, where we're not cutting players there anyway, where we'll do 2 days. But yeah, I mean, look, the long and the short of it is we know all of our players, all of our returning players. So we're only really looking at, the new players coming in. But there's also optics in that, with our current players and their families that, hey, if you only have 1 session or 2 sessions, oh, my son's not getting a look in. Well, no, we've been looking at your son for the last 12 months. We don't need, we don't need to look at him. And maybe we need to look at him up against someone. So it's, I mean, whether you do 1 day or you do, 10 days of tryouts, I mean, how perfect is the process?
Yeah, no, absolutely, some valid points there. So in talking to parents, though, this is what parents said they wished. They felt like they would love it if our communication was better leading up. So, for example, Paul, Randall, if we were to say, hey, the 2010s, we have 60 boys currently registered. We're looking at making 4 teams in reality based on everybody staying. So basically asking for a little more transparency from clubs. The other thing they thought was going into tryouts with the younger players, they thought it'd be brilliant if they knew if their child was in the top, middle, or lower third of the current group that they were in and how that looks after tryouts. Any comments on how you do things and how players are notified, Randall? I'll go with you first on.
Yeah. No, we do evaluations with all of our teams a couple weeks leading up to tryouts. So you talk about what they can work on, how they've done, evaluations in the wintertime as well for the teams that play all year long. The non-high school teams kind of revisit before tryouts, and then typically kind of let them know where they stand heading into tryouts. I don't know if middle or top, middle, bottom is how we do it, but we don't really rank them, but you typically let them know if, hey, you're on the bubble, or so to speak. If there's a kid that shows up that's head and shoulders better, then I need to drop you to the next team down. Give them some.
Randall, just to interrupt there, sorry. Is that conversation had with the child, with the parent, or with the child if they're a little bit older and they know that going into the tryout process?
Yes.
Brilliant.
With the when you get to a certain age, I think it's be with the child with just the player. But at those probably 14s and below, you want to have the parents with them as well. Because a lot of times what we've I'm sure all of you have run into it too. What you tell a player, what you tell your team after the game doesn't always get translated to the parents exactly what was said. So yeah, that's how we do it. The idea of letting parents and players know, how many players we have signed up, how many teams we're trying to form. That would be doable, but very difficult, I think, with the timing and everything. As you saw when you were here, I think we spent multiple hours on the field all day Sunday at State Cup finals, and then turned around and had to get ready for tryouts on Monday because they started at 9 o'clock Tuesday. So and we don't close registration till the day before in the afternoon.
There's no charge for your tryouts, right, Randall?
Correct. It's free. Yeah. So we get a lot of, typically there'll be 100 or 200 players that will register that last day.
Or walk on and register like they were doing as well, yeah?
What's that?
Or they will walk on and register like they were doing?
Correct. Yeah. They just show up at the fields and sign up at the tryout. So, and then there's players that sign up that, you have players in the city that sign up for every single tryout. And so when they actually, tryout day comes, they don't show up. Yeah. So, it's kind of, I understand where the parents are coming from and the families want to know a little bit more of where we're at, but that's kind of hard to do because, again, what we say, we want to try to follow through with, and we say there's 60 kids and only 30 show up, and we think we're lying to them. And no, we're not lying to you. This is how many signed up, but only this many showed up. So I thought one thing we did better this year was in the past, myself or Dada would do a parents meeting on day one at the beginning of tryouts. So all the different age groups, all the parents come in and thank them for coming, and here's the process. This year we had the individual age group, call them academy team coaches, so the top team coaches, with the parents as soon as the first day of tryouts is over, and explain to them where we're at with that age group. Because every age group was a little bit different based on numbers, based on what age they were and what league they might be playing in. So being able to communicate to the parents of, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the process. Maybe it's, hey, we got 60 kids. We're not going to be able to form as many teams on day one as we originally thought. We need to spend a little bit more time evaluating. So I want to see everybody back tomorrow. Some age groups, you could see what was there and you had a good idea of what we were at. So we were able to give those parents more, hey, everybody here is going to have a spot on the team. You should get a phone call later today at some point.
Yeah, and that process obviously was long and exhausting, but I think the transparency of it was, okay, this is what we're doing, this is what we go. But I'm talking about transparency from both ends, right? Because how many times have parents are like, yeah, we're in, and the next minute they've signed up somewhere else and they're wearing your neighboring club's uniforms.
Yeah, it happens for sure. But it happened quite a bit this year with us joining the Girls Academy and having some ID sessions and stuff ahead of time.
Yeah. And I think Kansas has more clubs per capita than New York has restaurants, if I'm not mistaken. So
it's crazy. It's anybody can go start their own club tomorrow if they want to. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
It was. Paul, how was your process? And just before I go to you, Paul, Randall, what you said there about letting players know if they're in the top, middle, or bottom third prior. In talking to players, and I spoke to Backer from Kansas, all the players said, listen, we'd rather our coach let us know because we've built that relationship. And then parents said, it gives us the ability to know what we have to work on. So I thought that was pivotal, and I thought it's brilliant that we're doing that. Because, if we're evaluating, I don't think schools could get away with giving a kid one report card a year. Right. So if we were to base ourselves off the scholastic system and maybe look at the way we do evaluations and individual development plans, it would probably be fair to say one every 10 weeks. So whether they're getting 4 prior to the tryout or placement process would be probably preferable by parents. And I think you get to the point where maybe you don't need tryouts because you've done so well over the years and people know where they stand, that the tryout process goes away. I know, like in Wisconsin, there would be a $35 charge for tryouts, but the kids would get a t-shirt. And then if you were to walk on, it could be something like $65. And again, that was based upon what everybody was doing in that market. So Paul, just jump into you quick, just talking about the process and the notification process and stuff and how that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, that's generally speaking a nightmare. You know, coaches, we rely on our staff and coaches to ensure that feedback is given prior to tryouts and throughout the year, but certainly prior to tryouts. However, it's a very, because there's such an unknown with the whole tryout process, to turn around to a player and say, you know what, you're probably not going to make this team if all things stand. You know, one, if you're just looking at it from a business standpoint, that's bad business to do. But if you're looking at it from a youth development standpoint, then absolutely that player and that family need to know. However, there are so many variables that happen during the tryout process that, hey, all of a sudden, you know, you may lose your 3 top players, or you may gain 6 players from a competitor. So to put even some general guidelines of, hey, I think your player, unless he or she is your top player, or, you know, they are absolutely, you know, guaranteed to, you know, they should be on the second team regardless. We could lose half the team, they're still going to be on the second team. You can give that feedback, but for the majority of the players, that's a tough one to do, because then, you know, whether it's doubts creep in the coach's mind or the parent's mind or the player's mind, then, you know, you end up sort of whipping up all sorts of stuff that ultimately, you know, didn't really mean much, but it could cause some pretty significant damage. So I think that's the first thing. From a notification standpoint, it's, you know, you're always waiting for the next person. You know, we used to do phone calls. We've moved to email notification. And again, you have, you know, for our top teams that are U13 and above, or even U10 and above, you know, you get the email back immediately. You know, they're responding. But when it's a second team, or maybe it's a weaker top team, or it's a second team or a third or a fourth or even fifth team, you know, when the process, you can't send out the second team until you've got a first team sorted, and then it has this knock-on effect that ends up taking a week. It's a nightmare. And unfortunately, the bottleneck has to go through our staff, because they've got to be involved. While, yes, the coaches are selecting the teams, the directors have a view over the entire age group across multiple locations. We go back to that issue once again. Hey, you picking this kid on this team at this location, you know, that is going to have an impact on these 3 other locations. So how that's controlled, and then the notifications from there, it's just, you know, we've talked about it, the last couple of years, we've tried to speed up the process. It's constantly, all right, we're going to give them 24 hours to respond. Now we're going to give them 12 hours to respond. After this year, I've turned around the staff and challenged them and said, hey, how can we slow down the process to ensure that, that player selections are the right ones, to ensure that the selection at one location doesn't necessarily negatively impact every other location. And that is tough, because the market doesn't allow you to do that. If we turn around and say, hey, we're going to take, you know, 3 weeks to do our tryouts and notification system, you know, club down the street is like, no, we're going to tell you in 12 hours. Why do you want to wait? Why would you wait, you know, 3 weeks for that? So it's tough, but we're going to, like we do after every tryouts, we'll sit down over, you know, once we get through the summer and start the full season, we'll then sit down as a staff and go through, hey, you know, ideas for next year. What was really bad this year? What really worked? What did we try new? And then just trying to evolve each year.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to open up if people have questions. Edgar, Keith, Dowda, you're on. If there's anything you missed, you can jump in. My thing is this, right? As a club, as clubs, do we really need tryouts? Can we invite? I don't know how it is in Tennessee or in Kansas, and I know you have. Can we invite players into training sessions and then maybe look at them that way? Our tryouts really needed. I know Ben John in Wisconsin this year, I think, had a record. They didn't do much advertising, and they had maybe 400 kids from outside the club register for tryouts, which is some kind of record without like advertising or anything. But my question is do you think your markets would allow you to go away from tryouts traditionally as they've been done, and maybe have players come into training sessions and so on and so forth? What are your thoughts on that, Paul? I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Randall and Dowder.
Unfortunately not, because we're not allowed, unless the coach of that player in their current seasonal year allows it, which they're not, as we all know.
Of course, yeah.
Then we can't have them come out. So we have this, we can't try out until State Cup weekends are finished. So we've got there's one date for the U12s and below, and another date for the U13s and above. And those dates, just happen to be the end of May, beginning of June. So we literally have a week where we can do it. Now we could spend that week, say to our, returning players, hey, you don't need to come out, or you're going to come out and train. But just as much as I would love to be able to just say, this is just a revolving door throughout the course of the year. That sounds very negative, but there's an open door policy that, hey, if someone's interested, come along, we'll look at you, maybe you fit in with the team, maybe you don't. That would be the ideal scenario. But again, the market, our state doesn't allow it, but also the market, our parents across the city, we find out what team we're in June, and then we pay our fees for the next couple of months, and then we're on that team for the year. That's what it is. To turn around and say, well, actually, no. I'm not saying it can't be done, and I would love to do something differently, but it's that, there's that fear factor of, hey, if we do something so radical, do we risk losing 500 players, which could happen? The answer to that might be, well, maybe it's worth it to do it the right way and then gradually build it back. But that's a big business risk.
I'm sure your board wouldn't approve of that. No. Right. But good stuff, Paul. Brilliant. Randall?
Same exact as Paul. We can't have players come to our training sessions without a form being signed by the player's coach, which isn't going to happen unless that player is ready to not be back on that team at some point during.
We have, so in Virginia we have something called open season, I think, in May. So it sounds like hunting. Do you know what I mean? We forget that it's all about youth players and development, and are they on the performance pathway? Are they on the participation pathway, essentially, and stuff like that? But we could go on for hours, right, talking about tryouts and so on and so forth. But Dowder, anything to add? Big man's on mute. Here he goes. Go Dowder.
Thank you for inviting me. So I think we talk about here, tryout process is very stressful to everyone, parent, coaches, director, So for me, I think we have to find a better way to do it. And I don't know what is that formula to better do it. So Kansas, go ahead.
That's huge there, Dowder, right? Because you did say it's stressful, and sometimes the parents that I spoke with did say it was stressful, but they felt like the stress and anxiety could be relieved if we as clubs communicated a bit better. But Paul talked about the complexities of letting people know, top, middle, bottom, third, with the domino effect that it could have, right? If parents were panicked and so on and so forth. But I think what it comes down to is communication. Is our communication consistent? Is it clear? How are our relationships with the people and the parents? And I think everything comes back to that. How are the coaches? Are people, like Paul said in earlier, are they committed? like Randall said, are the coaches engaged? Are they participating? Are they interacting with the kids? Everything that I saw while I was with you guys in Kansas, you know, obviously the different states have different restrictions, but it's, you know, how can we find little ways of putting what it's meant to be for, like the children first? How can we find those little ways of continuing to put that player first and provide that individual experience that Paul talked about earlier, which I think is huge. So, but fellas, Edgar, Keith, if you have questions, please unmute. I'd like to congratulate Kansas Rush on their runs at nationals and also at regionals. Paul, 2 teams still in. You're doing Rush proud. 4 teams there. Phenomenal. I think that's the first time Rush has ever had 4 teams from one club in a national championship. We wish you guys the best of luck and keep going. Chico, you unmuted. You look like you have a question.
No, it's not a question, but it's just, you know, here in Colombia, you know, all of these tryouts, it's a mess. First, on the communication side, well, here in Sierra, we don't have, you know, in my club, we don't have tryouts, because right now what we are doing is just, you know, building up, you know, the different ages groups or the different ages teams that we have. So right now we're accepting, you know, children from 4 to 12. So that's why we don't have tryouts here in the club. But every now and then we have 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds that they would like to, you know, have the opportunity to train with us. And those guys that, you know, that first came, they're now 15, 16. So what we do is, once, you know, they're older than 13 years old, what we do is we prepare them psychologically to go to those tryouts. But, you know, every tryout here in professional clubs, they're a mess. You know, there are thousands of children or you know, or young players going there. They have to pay. There are only one coach paying attention and see. And what we feel, or what we have felt here, is that it's a business. You know, they just want to grab the players' money, and that's it. They don't even watch them. They don't even, you know, have a good evaluation of their skills, anything. So what we feel right here in Colombia is that, you know, professional clubs, what they're doing is just grabbing the money from those players that they have that dream to become a professional player, and they just, you know, I see an opportunity, so let's take away their money. And, you know, most of the people that try to play soccer here in Colombia, you know, low income, you know, children that, you know, they want to become professional players, you know, to be able to bring their families and them to a higher standard, you know, and be able to achieve what they cannot achieve because, you know, our government doesn't give the opportunities that they need. So, you know, it's really hard here in Colombia. And, you know, I just want to say that because I've been listening to all of you guys, and it's like, wow, this is a dream. We don't have that around here. And, you know, just saying, like, Jesus, we're nowhere near what you guys have there in the States. So congratulations for that.
Chico, what you're saying is we're big babies for complaining for having so many people try out, and headaches where you guys have got a smaller pool. I'm just messing, Chico. But thank you for jumping on from Colombia. I got it right this time. Brilliant. Dauda, any closing comments from you, big man? I think we've lost that.
Thank you. No, I'm still here. So thank you, Chris. And
brilliant.
Thank you very much for your input, all. And I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dauda. Randall, Paul, any closing comments? Is there a question I should have asked you but didn't ask?
Oh, there's plenty of those questions. I'd rather not plead the fifth, though.
You can plead the fifth. You can plead the fifth. Randall, anything?
No, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. It's always good to talk and hear what other clubs are doing. And I think we're all open to trying to make the process better for the coaches, for the staff, for the parents and the players that's the most important thing. How can we make it better? So I appreciate it.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Chris, for your help when you came here.
Yeah, no worries. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'll be back again. So
well, look, I'm glad to know that you're available for hire for tryouts now. That's
yeah, Paul. Yeah, no worries. I can do that as long as Matt gives me off. We'll be fine. I was going to tell you, Paul, I went and bought an England stationery kit, pencil case and all that, but it was missing 3 pens. Hey, everyone, thanks for joining us. Our next webinar is going to be in August, and it's going to be on how to get your rec season set up right. So we'll have more information. We'll make this recording available. And thanks to everybody that joined us, and thanks to everybody who watched this later.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.